Welcome to our second lesson and our second fairy tale that we will be going through. We're going to be reading the fairy tale called The Emperor's New Clothes. It's probably one of the funnier ones of our fairy tales that we get to talk about. Remember, we're talking about, during this unit, we're learning about different characteristics of a fairy tale. Remember that fancy word characteristics means different little parts that make up a fairy tale. We're learning about why fairy tales are called fairy tales. And in our last story, there wasn't a fairy, there was just a magical fish. So, can anybody name different characteristics of a fairy tale? What does a fairy tale have to have? Again, a fairy tale has to have it has to have a royal character. A fairy tale is fiction. Remember, fiction means fake. A fairy tale often starts with once upon a time. A fairy tale always has to have a happy ending. It doesn't have to say happily ever after, but it has to have a happy ending. And then a fairy tale has a character that has magical powers as well. In our last read aloud, we also are talking about different vocab words. And our first vocabulary or word work word was that word displeases. So what I want you to do is I want you to repeat the word displeases after I read it. Ready? Displeases. Does anybody remember what that word displeases means? Remember, displeases has that prefix dis at the beginning. So if pleases means happy, displeases means not happy. We're going to have another vocab word in this read aloud as well to listen to. After today's reading, you should be able to analyze the actions of the characters in the Emperor's New Clothes. That means look at how the characters behaved in this story. And you're also shown an understanding to the word curious, our new word work word for this read aloud. So we're going to be listening and hearing a fairy tale called The Emperor's New Clothes. This fairy tale was first written down by a guy named Hans Christian Andersen, and he wrote other fairy tales like The Princess and the Pea, The Ugly Duckling, and The Little Mermaid. So that this story includes a royal character, an emperor. He's kind of like a king. And also, he has many people that serve under him as well, including people who make clothes for him. In this read aloud, I want you again to listen carefully to find out what the characters in this story, what they pretend to do. Many years ago, there was an emperor who loved fine clothes. Fine means very good and nice. He did not care for hunting. He did not care for plays or operas. He was no lover of gourmet food or wine. His only ambition was always to be well dressed. He had a different coat for every hour of the day. He loved to walk about and show off his fancy outfits. You can kind of see in the picture him showing off his outfit right now. One day, two strangers arrived in town. You can see the two men in this picture right here. Who do you think these people are, and what do you think they're doing? These people, they were swindlers, but they said they were master weavers from a faraway land. A swindler is someone who tricks people, and weavers are people who make clothes. Why do you think the men would pretend to be master weavers or people who make really good clothes? They told the emperor that they could weave the most beautiful cloth in the world. They said that not only was their cloth beautiful, but it was also magical. It was specially woven so that only the most intelligent people could see it. What do you think the word intelligent means? Again, yeah, it's the people who are smarter. So they're saying the people who are smart can see the fabric. Those who are ignorant could stare at the cloth all day and not see a thing. Astonishing, thought the emperor. I will have these men make a suit for me. When it is done, I will figure out who can see it. That way I will be able to tell which of the men who serve me are intelligent and which are fools. The emperor gave the swindlers a purse filled with gold coins and told them to begin weaving the magic cloth right away. A purse is like a bag that is used to hold money. The swindlers set up 2 weaving looms and pretended to be weaving their wonderful cloth. But they had nothing at all on their looms. Do you think magic cloth like this really exists? After a few days, the emperor grew curious to see the cloth. If the emperor was curious, that means he really wanted to find out more. At first, he thought he might check up on the weavers himself, but then he remembered that they said what they had said. Only intelligent people could see the cloth. He was confident that he was smart. There could be little doubt about that. But what if he was not? What if he could not see the cloth? So just to be on the safe side, he decided to send his prime minister to have a look. The prime minister is an important advisor to the emperor. He's kind of like his right-hand man. He is also supposed to be very wise. What do you think when he goes in to watch the weavers? What do you think he'll see? He is very intelligent, said the king. If he can't see the cloth, I dare say nobody can. The emperor called for the prime minister and sent him to check up on the weavers. The prime minister went to the room and peeked in. The 2 swindlers were working away at their looms. Prime Minister, one of the swindlers called out, you are welcome here. Come in, come in, come and see the cloth that we have produced. The man waved his hand at the empty loom and said, isn't it beautiful? Do you see anything on the looms? The prime minister squinted and rubbed his eyes and his head. He did not see the cloth at all, but he did not dare to admit it. Why does the prime minister see nothing at all? That would mean he was a fool, so he pretended to see the cloth. Yes, said the prime minister, it is the most beautiful indeed. I like it very much. Keep up the good work. Does the prime minister tell the truth here? Why is he pretending he's seeing the magical cloth? The prime minister turned to leave, but the second swindler called out, wait, don't go. You must not leave without touching the cloth. I think you will be impressed. We were just saying that it is the softest cloth we have ever created. The prime minister hesitated for a moment. Then he said, oh, of course, and walked up to one of the looms. He reached out his hand, rubbed his fingers together in the area where he thought the cloth must be. He could not feel anything, but he said, it is very soft indeed. Why, it's lighter than air. Thank you, said the first swindler. We are pleased with what we have done. And we are making very good progress too. But we need a little more money for thread and other materials. Of course you understand. Of course, said the prime minister. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bag of coins. Then he handed the coins to the swindlers. The prime minister went back to the emperor and told him that the cloth was quite lovely and as soft as could be. He said he was confident that the emperor would like it. That was that. The emperor had hoped. That was what the emperor had hoped to hear. The next day, he went to have a look for himself. After all, if his prime minister had seen the cloth, surely he could see it too. But when he stepped into the room where the two men had set up their looms, the emperor saw nothing on the looms. This is terrible, he thought. I don't see anything at all. What can this mean? If the prime minister saw the cloth, it must be there. Then why can't I see it? Am I not intelligent? Am I unfit to be the emperor? That would be the most dreadful thing that could ever happen to me. But out loud, this is what he said. Oh, it is magnificent. Truly magnificent. Why? I have never seen a cloth so lovely. Why does the emperor pretend to see this cloth? Shall we go ahead and make you a suit then, your majesty? Yes, by all means, said the emperor. You can get my measurements from the royal tailor. A tailor is somebody who makes clothes. So the two swindlers sat up late into the night, pretending to work on the suit. They wove more invisible cloth. They cut the air with scissors, and they stitched the wind with threadless needles. Other noblemen came to inspect the cloth, and all of them pretended to be able to see it, for they did not wish to appear they did not wish to appear unintelligent. Soon the whole town was talking about the wonderful cloth and the emperor's new suit. At last the day came when the emperor was to wear his new clothes in public. The two swindlers presented themselves in the emperor's dressing room at daybreak. Here is the jacket, said the first swindler, holding up an empty hanger. And here are your pants, said the other, holding one hand in the air. What do you think of them? All of the emperor's men agreed that the new clothes were splendid. The emperor took off his clothes, and the two swindlers pretended to help him put on the make-believe garments. All right, slip your right leg in here, your majesty. Oh, that's it. Now your left leg. Good. Now I must tell you, these pants are not like regular pants. The fabric is so light and airy that it feels like you are wearing nothing at all. But that is the beauty of them. The men helped the emperor put on the imaginary clothes. Then they led him to his looking glass. Oh, how handsome you look, your majesty, said one of the swindlers. All of the courtiers nodded their heads in agreement. The emperor marched out of the dressing room and made his way out of the palace, followed by many advisors and servants. He marched down the street of town with soldiers and bodyguards surrounding him on all sides. Why won't anyone tell the emperor that he's going for a walk in his underwear? The streets were lined with great crowds. Everyone had heard about the emperor's new clothes, made of magical fabric that only the wise or the intelligent could see. Oh, how lovely the emperor's new clothes are, one man said. And how well they fit him, added a woman. None of them would admit that they could not see a thing. Why don't the people say something about the emperor being or not wearing any clothes? The emperor marched through the street, bursting with pride, showing off his brilliant new suit to everyone in the land. Much to his surprise, they all seemed to see what he could not, and so he was not going to be the one to tell them. Just then, a young child stepped out of the crowd and cried out, "He hasn't got anything on!" Is the child telling the truth? A hush fell over the crowd. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then, everyone began to whisper, "The child is right. The emperor isn't wearing a thing." Then all the people began to giggle and laugh, and as they cried out, "He hasn't got anything on!" At last the emperor knew he had been tricked. He tried to march back to the palace as proudly as ever. But he was blushing from head to toe, as everyone could plainly see. Definitely a funny story. I always get a kick at the end of that story, how the emperor gets tricked. Let's do a couple of comprehension questions or questions from our story. How do we know that this story is a fairy tale? Why do the characters in this story pretend to see the emperor's new clothes? Why didn't they just tell him? Do you think there is a lesson to be learned from this story? Remember, our first story had a lesson. Is there a lesson to be learned in this story? One lesson I know is speak up and tell the truth, even if that truth might be something difficult. I think a lot of people didn't want to speak the truth because they thought they would not be smart if they did. In our read aloud, we're going to go through our next word for our word work, and this word is the word curious. So I'm going to say the word, you repeat it. Curious. So we have the vowel I in this word. What sound is that I making in curious? Yeah, it's making the E, curious, making an E sound. Why would this word be considered a tricky word? I think it's considered a tricky word because that I is making the E sound. That really doesn't happen very often. OU is making a sound, and we haven't really learned that yet either. So this is a tricky word because it's not really following some of our phonics rules. What do you think this word curious means? So that word curious means really wanting to learn more about something. I love this picture of this brain, and this brain's kind of thinking. And when you want to learn more about something, you ask those W questions: who, what, when, where, why. You can see those words around the brain. So when you want to learn more about something, that's the type of questions you ask yourself. Here's a sentence that goes with it. Reed was very curious about the bug on his front door. It had a purple body and bright orange legs. Have you ever been curious about something or seen an animal that was curious about something? I know for me, I have 2 cats, and one of my cats is always curious about little hair ties. She's always staring at the hair tie, wanting to play with it, always very curious. Something I'm really curious about all the time is I'm curious about music and how different songs sound and why they sound that way. That's something I'm curious in. For your application today, we're going to do an application called Act It Out. But before we act it out, we need to know what are some of the characters or those main characters in our story. So who are the main characters in this story? So some characters include the emperor, the prime minister, the 2 swindlers. You could have some townspeople. So what you're going to do is to act it out after we figure out who the characters are. Your teacher is either going to read this story again, or you can just play back the video of me reading this story, and you are going to act as the characters, and you are going to be playing the characters. Remember, use your imagination. Be as creative as you want with acting it out as well. And after you act it out, I'll see you next time for our 3rd fairy tale.